Awesome. Thank you so much, Kaylee, for that weather update. And welcome to our next guest, Max Farrell. Max, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Hey, thank you so much. Always glad to be here.
So, Max, you're no stranger to this show, and I'm always excited to get to chat with you because we always dive into some of those topics that really impact us every single day, but a lot of people don't really want to talk about. And this is one that I'm excited about because we're talking about some economic shifts and really how to treat employees during these potential economic shifts and potentially some down times for a lot of individuals. Let's jump into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there's a lot of news reports out there about potential recession, and in the tech sector, especially, there's been mentions of layoffs or restructuring, and so these things are starting to happen, and so as people naturally get worried when they see these things in the news, we have to start to think about what does that mean for companies, and then as individuals, you have to think about what does that mean for you. And one of the first things that I think is important to point out, especially in this industry, is what is the news not saying? So yes, in the tech sector, there's certainly mentions of layoffs happening, but what's not being said is that in industries like trucking, people are still trucking along, and that things are we have to keep moving forward. And so first and foremost is understanding what is the perception of what's being said versus what's not being said out there, and reading into the things in between the lines.
Also, hey Max, it's good to see you again. A lot of some of that kind of decisive information seeking, I guess you could call it, from employees comes from conversation within the four walls of your workspace, right? And you have to be able to do that on a very trustworthy level, whether that's your direct management or even sometimes upper level management. You've got to go down to the door and be able to knock on the door and say like, hey, this is what I'm hearing, what's actually going on. When you're that manager who's maybe being approached multiple times a day by your employees, just really seeking some honesty and some clarity about where things are at, maybe financially, or if they're, questioning, is my job safe? What type of advice can you have for those managers to really listen to their employees and listen and be reacting in a good way instead of being like quick to snap and quick to react back?
Yeah, my grandparents always said you got two ears and one mouth for a reason. So always got to take that to mind. But first and foremost, when it comes to feedback from employees to a manager to a company, you have to realize that feedback is going to go somewhere. And if you're not in a place to receive it and truly digest it, it'll go somewhere else. So if you're in the trucking industry, drivers are going to share it on forums or on Facebook or at truck stops. If you're in an office, people are going to go share it in a Slack chat or with their friends or coworkers outside of work over a drink, just saying, man, look at this ridiculousness. So the feedback is going to happen, and we have to recognize that it's not just going to bury itself. And so, as a leader, to your point, Kaylee, it's really important to participate in active listening. And I think one of the hardest things for us as humans is to jump in and say our immediate thoughts when somebody's starting to talk. But the ideal thing is just hush and listen, because we all have blind spots. And really, you can either take feedback as a gift or an insult. But if you take it as a gift, you really have an opportunity to become a better version of yourself as a manager, and then also take that input to strategically figure out how does that company become a better version of itself.
I think that along those lines, when you're looking at times of stress, whether that's economic or individual stress as a company, if you're in that upper level management, it can be really easy to kind of close your doors off and say, you know what, these are problems that we're looking at a high level, and we'll get back to our employees when we have a chance to, or when we know more what's going on. And that can create this really large divide almost, I feel like, between the upper level people who know and the lower level people who are like, we're left out in the dark, right? So what are some tips to kind of give that receptive, to really prevent that divide from happening during times of stress? How can upper level management take advantage of still being communicative with their lower level people without necessarily giving away too much information, and just make it really a two-way street of communication?
Yeah, you're spot on. I do think that there's been this ebb and flow over the past couple of decades, especially you think about 2008, when all of a sudden there was a lot of opportunity, a lot of availability in the labor market. Well, I think we've experienced a fundamental shift over the past couple of years, where companies have had to put into their muscle memory, oh, we got to take care of our people and we got to figure out what that looks like. And I don't think that's going to fade away, even if the economics shift, because we still have a labor crunch in a lot of sectors out there, and companies are realizing the power of institutional knowledge, the power of having a team in place that understands how you operate. And not only are they more productive, but in industries like trucking, they're safer. And that's worth a lot of money. So I think first and foremost, companies are realizing that you can't just say, we'll just get somebody else, because there is a real cost to it. And I'm sure all of us have had this experience either at restaurants that we go to, or maybe in our own workplaces, but just that feeling of that everything's new, everyone is new. And ultimately, a successful company has those folks that are the culture keepers, the rocks of their team that really drive the business forward. You can't just keep replacing folks day in and day out and expect that company to be a solid version of itself.
And Max, I think this kind of leads into a point that you've made some time ago, when really that impression that you make on employees can really have implications on your company or your business really long down the line. And can you talk to that a little bit more about how really this can kind of lead into your work, your employee growth and your workforce, or how your culture kind of gets shifted with the kind of people that get recommended to be brought on, and really how you kind of grow as a company from there?
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, you think about all the resources that are out there now for people to review a company before they ever apply for a job. You have tools out there like Glassdoor. You can look at Google reviews or Facebook reviews to see how is this company perceived in the market, and those are the things that people are looking at before they ever talk to an organization. So your brand matters, and how you treat your people matters, because they in turn are the ones leaving those reviews. And so if you want to treat your people poorly, they're going to share, and you're going to keep attracting a poor caliber of potential team member. And ultimately, you don't want that as an organization. You want the best, because it's really frustrating to work in a organization where people aren't doing their best work, or maybe they're just not the cream of the crop. And then if you have high performers that are inside a company that are working with people that are just kind of then those people get disgruntled and they leave. And then all of a sudden you're stuck with folks that you're like, maybe a year ago I probably wouldn't have had these folks on board, but you create your own mess as a company. And so it is really important to be proactive on these things, to listen to folks, to see what are they really wanting out there, and what adjustments do we need to make before we go down this really dark rabbit hole of having new people having negative reviews and having to go rebuild a culture, because it's really hard to build a culture, and once you have it, it's really easy to crack too. And so each little moment can matter and make a long-term impact if you're not careful.
At the end of the day, we know that not everybody, not every person, or not every company will survive an economic downturn. There will be casualties, but those casualties don't necessarily have to come with a super kind of huge loss, right? Like, you can soften the blow if you're a company that's shutting its doors or letting people go. What's your number one piece of advice for companies that are undergoing that tough decision right now to either shut their doors or to have mass layoffs? How can you still take care of your people when you have to make that ultimate choice to just end it all?
Yeah, companies are all founded on the entrepreneurial spirit. And so first and foremost, we have to ask the question, what do our customers really need right now in order to be successful through this tough time? And I think that's the first question that the companies need to ask, or people inside the company, to figure out, what am I hearing from anyone I'm interacting with? Are there opportunities for us to grow in a new way that maybe we didn't think? Because yes, economic crisis can lead to layoffs or companies not making it, but also it leads to some great companies starting. Airbnb was started during the last recession. So it's certainly possible that great opportunities can come up during a tough economic time. But if you do get stuck in a rut, you have to evaluate the options. Like, I'll give an example. For us during COVID, our investors came to us and said, "Hey, we're not sure what the future is going to look like. You should look at laying off people." I was like, that sucks. There's no jobs out there. And so what we did instead was we did salary cuts, and we set 2 different milestones and said, we hit milestone 1, we get half pay back. We hit milestone 2, we get full pay back. and we hit both milestones. And our company's been on a really great trajectory since then. So we all rallied together. And I think as companies, you'll be really surprised, if you tell your people, hey, here's the circumstance we're in. Are y'all down to ride through this and get out of this together? People will rally.
Max, I think that's an amazing example, and really just of practice what you preach, and really putting in that we're all in this methodology into practice. Thank you so much for joining us, CEO and co-founder over at Workhound. Where can people reach out if they want to find out more about you?
Well, you see the neon sign there, so it's workhound.com, workhound.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you about workforce retention and real-time feedback.
All right, Max, thank you for that. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, now we're going to head over to Isaiah Buchanan. He's got our first look at Social Roundabout for the morning.